Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Thank you. So I have 1,500. All right on time. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for taking the time to be with us today. We appreciate your interest in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and our Civil Works program. My name is Curry Graham. I'm the Director of Public Affairs for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It is my privilege to serve as today's moderator to discuss the details of the President's fiscal 2020 budget for the U.S. Army's Civil Works program. With us today, the Honorable R.D. James, Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, Lieutenant General Todd Semonite, USACE Commanding General and Chief of Engineers, Major General Scott Spellman, Deputy Commanding General for Civil and Emergency Operations, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Mr. Joe P. Bentz, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Management and Budget, Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, and Vincent Navarre, Acting Chief Program Development Branch, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Before we open for questions, Mr. James and General Semonite will make opening statements, and after their statements, I'll go over some short ground rules for our question and answer period. So, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I am pleased to introduce the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, the Honorable R.D. James. Sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me warn you before I start, we had a chili cook-off over in the Pentagon today at noon, and I was one of the samplers. So if I have to stop for an Alka-Seltzer, stick with me, please. Good afternoon. I'm R.D. James, the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works. Thank you for being here today to learn about the President's fiscal year 2020 budget for the Civil Works program of the Army Corps of Engineers. The fiscal year 2020 budget provides $4.827 billion for the Army Civil Works program, with a focus on investments that will yield high economic and environmental returns, or address a significant risk to public safety. This budget relies on foundation of strong relationships between the Corps and the local communities, which allow us to work together to help manage, develop, restore, and protect water resources. The budget focuses on the highest performing work within the three main missions of the Corps of Engineers, those being commercial navigation, flood and coastal storm damage reduction, and aquatic ecosystem restoration. The fiscal year 20 budget includes $2 billion for the study, design, construction, operation, and maintenance of inland and coastal navigation projects. The budget gives priority to coastal harbors and inland waterways with the most commercial traffic. It also provides for the maintenance of channels at small ports, with emphasis on those that support significant commercial fishing, subsistence, or public transportation benefits. The flood risk management program is funded at approximately $1.2 billion in the budget and includes funding to provide technical and planning assistance to local communities. The budget provides $187 million to restore several large ecosystems that have been a focus of interagency collaboration and to support restoring aquatic habitat in ecosystems where the aquatic ecosystem structure, function, and processes have degraded. All these investments will enable communities to facilitate waterborne transportation, reduce flood risk, and restore significant aquatic ecosystems. The budget supports a core program that has a diverse set of tools and approaches to working with local communities. Whether this means funding projects with our cost-sharing partners, providing planning assistance and technical expertise to help communities make better informed decisions, or participating in the national and international conversations on how to best address our water resource challenges. The budget helps us maintain and improve our efforts on resiliency and sustainability. The budget also focuses on maintaining the vast water resource infrastructure that the Corps owns and manages, and on finding innovative ways to rehabilitate it or hand it over to others. These goals will be met by funding capital investment in the inland waterways and reforming the way that we finance these investments. Our proposal includes establishing an annual fee that will support infrastructure investment and economic growth by helping finance the user's share of future capital investments, as well as 10% of the operation and maintenance costs associated with these waterways. The budget also reproposes to divest the Washington Aqueduct, which is the wholesale water supply for Washington, D.C., Arlington County, Virginia, the city of Falls Church, Virginia, and parts of Fairfax County, Virginia. The budget reproposes revisions to the appropriations language for the construction, operation, and maintenance, Mississippi River and tributaries accounts, the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, and Inland Waterways Trust Funds to enable greater transparency and accountability in how these funds are budgeted and spent. The press book, which you have before you, reflects this by displaying the total account and project funding levels derived from each of these funds. The budget promotes increased non-federal participation in construction of civil works projects to improve project delivery and to increase cost savings. It includes $150 million in the construction account for WRDA 214, Section 1043, non-federal construction of the federal projects program. The Corps would transfer this funding to non-federal sponsors who have decided to construct an authorized project on their own under Section 1043 of WRDA 14 as amended. The budget proposes to extend this program's authorization, which currently expires June the 10th of 2019. The budget provides $150 million in the construction account for the Innovative Funding Partnerships Program. These funds would be used in conjunction with funds voluntarily provided by non-federal interests in excess of the non-federal sponsor's statutory cost share requirements to accelerate the completion of construction of authorized projects. In addition, the budget proposes to return responsibility for management of the formerly utilized Sites Remedial Action Plan, known as FUSRAP, back to the Department of Energy. The Army Corps would continue to perform the cleanup of FUSRAP sites on a reimbursable basis with DOE. Consolidation of FUSRAP with the other DOE federal cleanup programs under a single agency will allow DOE to consider a broader range of federal cleanup responsibilities in prioritizing work each fiscal year and result in efficiencies for taxpayers. The fiscal year 2020 investigations program is funded at $82 million in the budget, including $5 million from the Mississippi River and tributaries account, of which $26 million is to fund studies to determine the need, engineering feasibility, economic, environmental, and social return of potential solutions for water and related land resource problems. The investigations account includes funding to complete one pre-construction engineering and design Mobile Harbor, Alabama, and 3 dredge material management plans, Buffalo Harbor, New York, Cleveland Harbor, Ohio, and Corpus Christi Ship Channel in Texas. The fiscal year 20 construction program includes a total of $1.3 billion. This includes funding for 9 commercial navigation projects, 5 aquatic ecosystem restoration projects, and 4 flood risk management projects. The construction program uses objective, performance-based guidelines to allocate funding toward the highest performing economic, environmental, and public safety investments. 4 construction projects are funded to completion in the fiscal year 2020 budget. It's 4 construction projects. They include 3 commercial navigation projects, Charleston Harbor, South Carolina, lock and dams 2, 3, and 4 on the Monongahela River in Pennsylvania, Mel Price Lock and Dam, Illinois, Missouri, and 1 aquatic ecosystem restoration project, the Mud Mountain Dam in Washington. The fiscal year 2020 O&M program is funded at $3 billion. For O&M, the budget emphasizes performance of existing projects by focusing on those coastal harbors and inland waterways with the most commercial traffic. The allocation of funding for maintenance among projects reflects a risk-informed approach that considers both project component conditions, and the potential consequences of failure. The budget also makes important investments in the O&M program to promote the sustainable management of the lands around core facilities by providing funds to update the plans that govern how we manage our facilities and combat invasive species. The budget proposes to derive $965 million from the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund to maintain coastal channels and related work, and $55.5 million from the Inland Waterways Trust Fund to complete locks and dams 2, 3, and 4 on the lower Monongahela River. The fiscal year 20 regulatory program is funded at $200 million to protect the nation's waters and wetlands and provide efficiency and consistency in permit processing. Lastly, the budget provides a total of $32 million for the Emergency Management Program, a robust level of funding to help ensure that our people are properly trained and equipped so they'll be able to help communities respond to a flood or other disaster. I'm glad to be with all of you today. Thank you for coming. I'll turn it over to General Semonite.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to everyone who has joined us here today in our headquarters and on the phone. I also want to thank Mr. James for his opening remarks, and I want to share that we greatly appreciate the support he has shown us for the important work that the Army Corps of Engineers does for our nation in the Civil Works program. My thanks go out as well to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers headquarters Civil Works staff for all their efforts in getting us here today. Rolling out the annual Civil Works budget is a cooperative and time-consuming effort between the Assistant Secretary's Office, OMB, and USACE to work its many details. Over the last 34 months as the Commanding General of USACE and the Chief of Engineers, I've had the great privilege of being able to travel to nearly all of our districts and divisions to see the vital work that USACE is doing at home and around the world. I take great pride in being a member of the dedicated, passionate, and professional group of people who make up the Army Corps of Engineers. As you all know, our nation was again challenged in the past year by multiple major natural disasters. These include Hurricanes Florence and Michael that led paths of destruction from flooding and winds in the Southeast in September and October. And just as we did 4 times in 2017, our teams again deployed to respond and did an amazing job providing support. Even as we are here today, USACE is performing water management and supporting community flood fighting efforts in multiple watersheds. We are also planning and preparing for high-level events in other areas of the nation that will come with the spring thaw of significant snowpacks accumulated this winter. The United States Army Corps of Engineers is working to become an agent for change in addressing the water resource challenges of the future needs for the nation. We aim for the best ways to manage, develop, restore, and protect the water resources of the nation, and to do so as effectively and efficiently as possible, which we will require innovative and forward thinking. In other words, in the Corps, we want to revolutionize how we do business. We are committed to setting a world-class professional standard for service and delivery to provide the best value to the nation in all the work that we do. We will continue to modernize our processes, equip the organizations with the policy, the tools needed to deliver on our missions, and seize opportunities to achieve our vision of engineering solutions for the nation's toughest challenges. Working in conjunction with Mr. James, General Spellman and his team have developed over 150 different initiatives of how to be able to revolutionize the Corps of Engineers. As an organization, we look forward to continuing to work with the leadership team of the Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Army Civil Works and others within the administration, as well as Congress. We look forward to discussing the FY20 Civil Works budget in detail and executing these important projects on time to a high standard for our nation.
Thank you, Mr. James.
Hey,
General
Curry,
Semonite.
just a few things I want to add on to the chief's comments before we go take questions. Mr. Secretary and Chief, thanks for your comments. As you've heard, the chief and the secretary gave you an overview of the fiscal year 20 budget. And what I'd like to do at this time is just go into a bit of additional detail before we take your questions and comments. As you have heard, the fiscal year 20 budget, Civil Works budget represents a continuing investment in the nation's water resources infrastructure, in our restoration of our aquatic ecosystem systems. It also reflects the realities of the nation's current fiscal path and status and the tough decisions that have to be made to put the nation on a fiscally prudent path. As Secretary James shared with you, the FY20 budget funds construction on 18 projects and programs across the nation. That includes 9 commercial ports navigation projects, 5 aquatic ecosystem restoration projects and programs, and 4 flood risk management projects. Okay, so the FY20 budget for investigations consists of 2 feasibility studies and program management for the interbasin control of Great Lakes Mississippi River aquatic nuisance species, 5 pre-construction engineering and designs or PEDs, 6 dam safety modification plans, 3 dredge material management plans, the Columbia River Treaty 2024 implementation, 5 tribal partnership studies, and 6 disposition studies of completed projects. For flood risk management, the FY20 construction budget provides $50 million for Rough River Lake, Kentucky, $59 million for American River Common Features, Natomas Basin, California, $57 million for Lower Mississippi River Main Stem, $25 million for Raritan River Basin, Greenbrook Subbasin in New Jersey, and $17 million for the Dam Safety and Seepage Stability Correction Program. For navigation, the FY20 construction budget provides $138 million to complete construction of the Charleston Harbor in South Carolina, $130 million for the Savannah Harbor expansion in Georgia, $111 million, that includes $55.5 million from the Inland Waterways Trust Fund to complete construction on the locks and dams 2, 3, and 4 Monongahela, Pennsylvania project. $75 million for the Sault Ste. Marie replacement lock in Michigan, $53 million for the Corpus Christi ship channel in Texas, $36 million for the Columbia River at the mouth in Oregon and Washington, $35 million for Boston Harbor, Massachusetts, $24 million for the Melvin Price Lock and Dam between Illinois and Missouri, and $17 million for Poplar Island in Maryland. And then finally, for ecosystem restoration, the FY20 budget provides $63 million for the South Florida Ecosystem Restoration Program, which includes the Everglades, $33 million for the Upper Mississippi River Restoration, $22 million for the Columbia River Fish Mitigation Program, $18 million for the Missouri River Fish and Wildlife Recovery Program, and $16 million to complete construction of the Mud Mountain Dam in Buckley, Washington. The FY20 budget also funds USACE's participation in the development of interagency state-level teams, frequently known as Silver Jackets. We now have active state flood risk management teams in nearly every state. Silver Jacket teams bring together multiple state, federal, and sometimes tribal and local agencies to help local communities understand and identify the options for managing their flood risks, with a focus on non-structural solutions and to enhance the response effort of states and counties when a flood does occur. So just in closing, the proposed investments that you see in the Civil Works program are positive investments in the nation's economy, our environment, and our quality of life. As we've done for more than 240 years, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers remains focused on finding engineering solutions for the nation's toughest challenges. USACE will continue to be a partner in the national dialogue concerning the many current and future water resources challenges facing our nation. We are committed to working with our many partners at the national, state, and local levels to identify and deliver sustainable and long-term solutions for these challenges. And now at this time, I want to thank you for your attention. We'll turn this back over to Mr. Curry Graham for the question and answer period, during which Secretary James, General Semonite, and I would be happy to take any questions or comments that you may have for us. Okay, Curry.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Mr. James, General Semonite, General Spellman. So let me go over the ground rules for the question and answer period. We'll first take questions from members of the media here in the audience. Then we'll go to members of the media online on the phone. And then we'll turn it back over to anybody else who would have a question here and online. Because we do have a transcript that will be available for you later, and also because we are on Facebook Live, and we want to make sure that we have the transcript correct. Please speak directly and clearly into the mic so the moderators can also hear us online. So with that, we'll start with the questions, and anybody here with the media here in the audience, please, and online operator, if you can start queuing the questions online. Questions from the media? Okay, yes, sir.
Hi, this is David Schultz. I'm a reporter with Bloomberg Environment. I was a little surprised to learn, or when I found out yesterday, that the Corps is cutting its budget by more than 30%. Especially given the president's emphasis on infrastructure as one of his top priorities, especially during the campaign. Can you describe what that was like when you went to the White House and proposed, I want to cut the budget of the Corps of Engineers by 30%? Did they push back and say, no, you can't do that because, we're an infrastructure presidency, or why, what was that conversation like between you and the White House over these kind of, pretty unprecedented cuts to your own agency? Sure, go, either you or Lieutenant General Semonite, or any of you, I guess.
Well, the budget has not been cut 30%. That's comparing this budget to last year's budget and work plan. So this budget has not been depleted that much.
Sure, cut 30% from last year.
Well, not from the president's budget itself, from the appropriations.
Right.
It's been cut 30%.
Yeah, how did that conversation go when you asked the president to cut your budget by 30% from the appropriation?
Well, I'm not going to answer that question. You might ask the president that, but I won't answer that question.
Did you propose a 30% cut?
I did not.
Did you, so who did?
I told you I'm not going to answer the question about the funding. It's the president's budget. I work for the president. So does OMB work for the president.
So this was not your
idea. Those three offices work in concert to develop a budget. It's not what I walk in and say I want or I don't want.
So you don't want to cut the budget?
Pardon me?
You do not want to cut the budget of your agency?
Well, I can't say that either. The administration is trying to be fiscally responsible and do what's possible to reduce the deficit that we're in. This budget represents a program that, number one, is dedicated to completing projects rather than recognizing projects that are in the queue that can't be completed in one fiscal year. That's what we're trying to do. And the other thing is the budget is based on projects of high economic and environmental return as well. So that's how this budget was formulated and based.
And then you wound up with a 30% cut.
It's not a 30% cut.
That, wow, I mean,
we were appropriated
funds.
We were no. Go back and look at last year's presidential budget.
Right, which that was never enacted.
And compare that unto this presidential budget, which may or may not be enacted.
Right.
And you can't compare last year's congressionally appropriated funding to this year's president's budget. That's not.
Well, I mean, you can. I guess I am.
Go ahead. I won't.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the any other questions from the media in the audience. Remember to state your name and your organization when you do. Members of the media here on the floor. Operator, are there any members of the media online that would like to to ask a question?
We have two that are queuing up right now. We just need to wait for their names to be gathered.
Okay. First question online. Any questions online? Okay, while we're waiting online, sir.
Yes. Mr. Secretary and General Semonite, the Corps contributes to the health and safety and welfare of the nation and of many communities. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The Corps projects availability are publicly owned and are as critical to America as highways, frankly. The highway program has a dedicated source of revenue. And the Corps and the administration should move forward now and with the Congress to develop and propose and enact a new source of federal dedicated revenue that can raise federal funding to fit a new national needs survey prepared by the Corps on a continuing basis. Your thoughts, sir?
That has been talked about. I've only been in this position for a year, but I've been around this for 37 years, and it's been talked about more than once. You know, that dedicated funding would have to be made up of two different parts of our government, the administration and the Congress, for it to go anywhere. It could possibly be a better way than what we're doing it now. I think it would have to be looked into, and some economic science put to it rather than just what I think. I do know how the Department of Transportation is funded. Of course, there was some discussion this past year, you know, about taking the Corps out of the Army. And during that discussion, it came up that it could be the Civil Works program could be treated and funded like the Department of Transportation. So this, I'm glad you brought it up. It's worth discussing. It's worth talking about. But you know, from my position, I can't make that decision.
And sir, for the record, can we get your name and organization on the mic, sir?
I'm Bob Weaver, Robert C. Weaver, attorney at law. And I think there are a lot of local governments who would work with you to move that idea forward. And we should do it now in this administration and not wait for another administration.
Well, that's worth considering. Let me back up just a moment on the Corps last year. There were, from different avenues, different parts of the administration and the different parts of the Congress that were talking about taking the Corps out of the Department of the Army. It would jeopardize all of us had they gone forward with that discussion, because the main precipice of what they were talking about was putting navigation in one agency and flood control in another. And you cannot separate flood control and navigation and be successful. It cannot be done. We have the largest inland waterway system in the world that we enjoy in the United States. And when you try to separate flood control and navigation, we would probably ruin 1/3 to 50% of it if we did that. It can't be done.
Is that idea still on the table?
I don't think so. You still hear mention of it every once in a while, but I don't think so. You know, when you throw something out like that, you get a lot of people's attention, and then you get a lot of realism brought into the picture, above and beyond what maybe you thought of. Maybe if I thought of that, people would come to me and we'd have discussions and some actual academic discussions rather than just thoughts. And I think that's where we are on that right now. That you just think about how you're gonna manage 47 or 42, I think it is, Corps of Engineer districts around this country. How you're going to manage 7 divisions of the Corps of Engineers around this country, and it's both technical, it's strategic, but it requires a certain kind of leadership, and I think the Army is poised with that leadership. I'm not saying we do the best job there could be in the world, but somebody'd have to show me better.
Hey, Mr. Weaver, General Seminite. So let me answer your question from another approach. And you really talked about funding and maybe thinking out of the box. So I think all of us in the Corps realize that there's not enough money in the federal government to be able to take care of the requirements we have. I mean, not only in the Corps, but across the nation. So all of us have to be very innovative on how we think of other ways of sourcing things. I talked about revolutionize, what Scott's working right now, 3 different approaches. One of the number 2 prong of what we're trying to do in Civil Works is to transform project financing and budgeting. And there are many, many different business models that are out there that we think need a little bit more looking at it. So we've talked about P3s in the past, private-public partnerships. We're excited to look at other options out there, and whatever we can do to continue to work side by side with stakeholders, work with OMB, work with congressional scoring to be able to have some of those as viable options of saving taxpayers' dollars. We think there's great merit there. So I think we would just have to, I'm trying to expand your question a little bit broader to say, let's not try to figure out how we've been doing it for 243 years. Let's figure out where there's something else we can do a little bit different. And then we need the appropriate authorizations perhaps, or certainly the support from the whole of government to be able to see some of those things through.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Mr. Weaver. Online operator, are there any media questions?
Yes, we have a few. Our first question is from the line of Tom Ichniowski with Engineering News. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much for doing this. I hope these will be kind of quick answer questions. I think it was General Spellman who talked about a total of 18 projects in the bill and in the budget rather. And I'm wondering whether that the funding there that they would be allocated, would that complete all those projects?
Tom, this is General Spellman. The answer is no. So only 4 of those 18 projects were funded to completion. We're happy to give you the details on those. The remaining 14 allows us to continue construction on ongoing work.
Okay. Related to that, what's your current estimate of the Corps Civil Works construction backlog? I think the last number I saw, which may be a little old, was something like $90 billion. Is that a good number, or is it higher than that?
You're close. It's about today. We just did a reassessment on the backlog. It's about $98 billion, and at the the current level, we get about $1 billion each year on our track record for construction. So it would take us about 100 years to work our way through that backlog. Of course, projects come off and new projects come on, but that's the current estimate.
And I think this is for General Seminite, and if you said this and I missed it, I apologize. Are there any funds there for, you talked about some of the hurricanes from last year. Is there a dollar amount that you're seeking for emergency funds? Or is that separate? Is that not?
It's really separate. You're probably aware there's a disaster supplemental from 2018 that provided to the Corps about $17.4 billion. We're right in the middle of executing that, and Secretary James and I are very committed to pushing everything we can to move dirt to be able to make that happen. We don't know what will happen with Congress with any supplemental related to Florence or Michael, but there could be some actions to do that. There is a small part of our budget that allows us to train people up to be able to respond. We're adequately funded for that, but that doesn't talk about construction. That's strictly a training capability that we do to be able to respond to some of the disasters. So I think basically that I'm not talking in this budget of anything that's directly related to disaster response.
Okay, I was just looking at the overall DoD military construction budget, and there's a $9 billion emergency unspecified, and I was wondering if any of that was your money. That's not the Civil Works, of course.
That's correct. That's not us.
Okay, good. Thanks a lot.
Operator, the next media question online, please.
Next question is from the line of Jenny Stolzovic with Miami Herald. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I wanted to ask about the money set aside for Everglades restoration projects. First of all, Governor DeSantis and some members of Congress had asked for $200 million to complete some projects. I wondered if that was, I know you said $63 million. Was there ever any consideration for the $200 million? And also, can you tell me if the $63 million includes paying for some of the design work that needs to be done for an Everglades reservoir? The Corps had finished its assessment, and I believe was in the process of going back and looking at the design and coming up with a new design to answer a lot of questions that were raised in the assessment. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Jenny, this is General Spellman. So you're correct. I gave you a figure of $63 million toward the South Florida Ecosystem Restoration Program. And what that's going to allow us to do is to continue with the ongoing work we have at the, and I'll just walk you around Lake Okeechobee. So in the north, the Kissimmee River Restoration Project. Out on the east, we have the C-44 or the Indian River Lagoon South project. As you know, we have the ongoing work that was funded to completion by the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018 last year on the Herbert Hoover Dike. All of that work continues. And then, of course, we're providing some construction oversight out on the west side on the C-43 reservoir, with the lead there with being the state of Florida. To answer your question, yes, on the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir, we have not been formally asked by the South Florida Water Management District, our non-federal sponsor, to initiate any formal design effort on the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir, that particular dike, although we are leaning forward, and we expect that request to come once we have the the new members of the South Florida Water Management Board seated, and we expect to have them in the seats here in 48 hours for their next meeting on the 14th of March. So we'll know more after that time for more detailed response to your question.
Hey, Jenny, General Seminite, just to add, so you know we have several different business lines. Sometimes they might look like they're competing against each other, but I want to make sure that you know and the people of Florida know that we are very, very committed to ecosystem restoration. We've been working on the Everglades very hard for over 15 years. We got a lot of projects underway. And while there are times when requirements clearly exceed the amount of funds that could be available, I want to reiterate to you that in no way does that take our focus off of continuing to work not only the issues with Lake Okeechobee, Herbert Hoover Dike, and also the ecosystem restoration for one of the most important watersheds in the world. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
Operator, any other media questions online?
We have one more question, and that is from the line of Mac Wade with Port of Morgan City. Please go ahead.
Mr. James, I want to thank you for the consideration you all gave us in the Civil Works Plan. Thank you all very much. I just wanted to make a point. With the Mississippi River flooding, and we're on the Chaffalaya, we receive about 30% of that flow off there. We are really being inundated very, very hard right now with a tremendous amount of silt and a lot of sand coming down the river. We got buoys almost out directly in the middle of the Chaffalaya River right now. But just wanted to make y'all aware, and I'm sure y'all are aware of it. So if there's anything coming down the road, supplemental disaster, and I know this is not really the call for it, but please consider us down here on the Chaffalaya River.
Mr. Wade, thank you for calling in about that. That leads me into bringing to attention. General Seminite mentioned the disasters we'd had with the hurricanes the past couple of years, the fires and the mudslides and everything else. And I did want to mention to this crowd here today that we're potentially facing another disaster, and that's the flooding of the Missouri, the Ohio, and the Mississippi rivers. They've been very high all winter, 3 months above their normal depth and height at this time of the year. We've got another rainstorm going through the Midwest, Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and on up the Ohio Valley this weekend, which could bring those to critical stages in all those rivers I mentioned. And so Mac, I know you said you're flooding and you're silting in and everything else, but I'm afraid that the worst is not over.
Okay, questions in the audience? We have one right here. Sorry.
Jim Durkee with Dawson and Associates. This is for Secretary James. You had mentioned at the National Waterways Conference that you liked using the budget process to push construction projects across the completion line. Is there any one of the four that you were particularly pleased to see on the list this year?
I won't pick out a single one. I'm glad to see all four of them that may or be heading to completion, and that's the focus of the administration right now. That's why you see no new starts. The tenor of this budget is try to complete projects that have already been authorized and are in the construction queue at some stage, in an effort to try to complete those. And that's in an effort to bring more online as we do that.
Okay, next question, please.
Hi, Susan Gilson, National Association of Flood and Stormwater Management Agencies, NOFSMA. And I just wanted to confirm, I didn't hear or see in the budget any funding for WIFIA, the Water Infrastructure Finance Innovation Act, for this fiscal year. So I just wanted to confirm that I didn't miss anything and what the future plans might be.
No, ma'am, you didn't miss anything. We're still working with the EPA. We're kind of copying the system that they already have stood up for a WIFIA type program, where the Corps is working with them hand in glove. We think we will have something finished and ready to go from the Corps perspective in 2020. The loan program, it doesn't seem to be, well, just loan me the money and I'll bill that. Well, it doesn't seem to be quite that easy. So I think we're looking at 2020 before we can stand up any WIFIA programs.
Another question in the audience here.
You're good to go. All right. Gentlemen, Debbie Weatherly. I spent 25 years with House Appropriations. I now work for Everglades Trust. And on behalf of the 32 major environmental organizations, we want to thank you for your steadfast commitment to seeing restoration through. And I wanted to let you know that, if you don't already, letters have been delivered to the chairwomen and chairmen and ranking members of the Energy and Water Committees in the House and Senate asking for the $200 million. And 27, the entire Florida delegation, Republicans and Democrats, all 27 sent a letter also to those individuals supporting that. And the reason we're asking for that is because we need to get that number up for a consistent number of years to get some of these projects completed and others further down the road. So I just want to thank you for what you've done. This has been a challenging time.
Next question in the audience, please. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thanks for doing the briefing. I'm Paul B. with PHP Public Affairs. I just have a question on the funding of the Section 1122 beneficial use pilot projects, and was funding found for that? Is that in this budget? Whatever you can tell us would be fine. Thank you.
As you know, the 1122 is a beneficial use of dredge material. We were given 95 projects to look at. The Congress told us to pick 10 of those, which we did, and subsequently told us to pick another 10, which we are doing. We have not got funding in this budget for the 1122 program, but we did take some funds out of the 2018 work plan to put against the design of these 10 projects. So we will be ready to go when we get the funding. We're ready. We just need to get it's hard to build anything if you don't have the design, and I think we've got some design money now, so we're hoping to get in later.
Any other questions in the audience? Operator, are there any other questions online?
Yes, we have a question from the line of Mike Strawn. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. My name is Mike Strawn. I represent several public sector flood control agencies out west. My question, and I think this is best directed to you, Mr. Secretary, but my question relates to the $150 million you mentioned that is included for Section 1043 of WRDA 2014. You did acknowledge that legislation will be needed to extend the authority beyond this June, which in itself is going to be a little bit of a head scratcher to prospective applicants. But my question is, do you plan on issuing proposed implementation guidance for public comment so that folks out there who are thinking about trying to take advantage of this authority know what's being proposed? And more generally, what are the next steps that potential non-federal entities who might be interested in this authority, what should we be anticipating?
Mr. Strong, the public comment period on 1043 is already closed, and actually the signed guidance should be completed this week.
Thank you, sir.
Another question, operator?
We currently have no more questions at the moment.
Okay, any other questions in the audience? Yes, sir.
It's me again. Hi. David Schultz with Bloomberg Environment. Just another question, I guess, or maybe the same question asked a different way. You were appropriated from Congress $7 billion for FY19. This budget is for $4.2 billion. If Congress does end up adopting this budget, what would you stop doing in FY20 that you're not, or sorry, what would you stop doing in FY20 that you are doing in FY19? What things wouldn't you be doing?
Well, if Congress winds up appropriating you really have to be tough, don't you?
That's my job.
So there's a baseline amount of money we need to be able to run CORE type functions like locks and dams, okay? You know, rec areas, to be able to work our hydro. So that O&M bill is normally there, and all of the other baseline planning functions, ecosystem restorations. So that would probably not change at all. There are certain things that we got last year that we were able to put towards some projects that had been started several years ago and are still not done. So that means that those projects, I'll use as an example, Chickamauga Lock and Dam, okay, perhaps, that where we were able to put work plan money against a project that is nearing completion, that if that money didn't come this year, then that project could very easily get shut down. Okay, so those are some of the things that would be out there. More probably on the construction side, or maybe some degree of large O&M upgrades that we were able to do, but the regular normal day-to-day functions of the Corps and the budget that we propose, we would think we would continue to be able to do without significant detriment to the day-to-day options. It's just that we wouldn't be able to buy down some of that backlog.
And the last question I had is there enough money in this budget to complete the overhaul of the Waters of the United States rule?
My thoughts are yes, there would be.
Okay, any other questions in the audience? One right there, Rainey.
John Doyle with the Jones Walker Law Firm. Just following up on that last round of question and then your comment, Chief. Two projects that are funded in lock and dam modernization projects in the construction account, funded in FY19 substantially, are the Chick project that General Semonite mentioned and the Kentucky Lock and Dam, neither of which is funded in this budget proposal for FY20. So what kind of shutdown costs would be incurred with respect to those two projects which are not being funded? And how much would the long-term costs of those projects increase under this budget proposal with no funding for FY20?
Yeah, so great question. I don't have that particular number or shutdown cost now. We can certainly generate it and get it back to you if you want to. And then, as you said, if in fact you're going to take a project that was expected to be done in a certain amount of time and you have to put it on a knee for a year, then that's going to push not only time out, but it's going to clearly increase the overall cost. I think this goes back to the question of we are absolutely committed to continue to finish projects that we've started, okay? And while this budget doesn't allow us to do more than about 4 of them, we want to continue to try to advocate for those projects that have had substantial investment so we can continue to see those things through. And if Congress is so inclined to be able to give us additional money as they had for the last 6 years in a row, we will work with the secretary to figure out where does that money go to hopefully be able to make sure maybe there's a couple more projects we can get to the, if not finish this year, pretty close.
Okay, checking for more questions in the audience.
Just
One
to
last-
follow up on that, let me ask you, as you're working with the Congress, to look real hard at those 2 projects. You're only using $55 million of Inland Waterway Trust Fund money. There's going to be approximately 115 million generated under the current 29 cent per gallon diesel tax. So that leaves 60 million on top of the 33 million that's already excess in the trust fund. So there's going to be plenty of trust fund money to support those 2 very important projects.
Yeah, so I think everyone needs to know that not only are we, we worked this budget very hard with the secretary, but our work's not done. And we will continue to be able to have a one-to-end list so that if other funds are available, then we can make sure we make a recommendation to the secretary as to where those ought to go.
Any further questions in the audience? Operator, checking any other questions online?
No questions through the phone.
Okay, I think that concludes our press availability today. Thank you so much for coming out. It was a pleasure having you.
And that does conclude our conference for today. Thank you for your participation if you're using AT&T Executive Teleconference. You may now disconnect.